So, for those of you not tracking, if you were hiding under a rock, if you were hiding under a stone, um, Hulk Hogan passed away. And we feel it's important to talk about his contributions to wrestling. Look, I get it, folks. A lot of people hate him for crap he said 10 plus years ago or whatever the case may be. And I get it. He's not a. We're not here to talk about his personal life. We're here to talk about who he was and what he did for wrestling. So, like, been seeing clips all day, seeing stuff, everything. Like, dude was on the A team. He had a whole episode of the A team. Like, for crusty old mofos like this guy, like, A Team was big. It was A Team, Knight Rider, Airwolf. Like, those were the big three. And, like, I grew up watching those. So it was always big that, you know, especially when you got a guy like Hulk Hogan. He was in Rocky 3. Look, he was pop culture before pop culture was pop culture. That's the big thing. His name was synonymous with wrestling. And that's not to take away from Matt will tell you, I'm a huge Rivals fan. I love the show Rivals. And I love to see all the storylines and the stuff behind that. And really, it's not to take away for guys like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, who are, in their own rights, some of the greatest wrestlers ever. But Hulk Hogan took it mainstream. And then you have to understand his contributions as a whole to the industry, which is in the 80s, everybody knew who he was. And they knew he did wrestling, and put an eyeball on WWE. Fast forward to the Monday Night Wars. And in the Monday Night Wars, you get, again, him changing the industry. Like, the Monday Night Wars don't happen unless he does his heel flip. Him going to WCW was big news, but when he became a heel and the NWO was formed, it was huge. It changed it from, I'll see what's kind of going on, to I must see WCW. Like, so much so that I would record WCW in the bedroom. I would watch the first hour, watch the 2 hours of Raw, catch the overrun of WCW, and then I would have to go back and watch a recording to see all the meat in the middle that I missed. That's how big he made WCW. And that forced WWE to up their game. Then we got Stone Cold Steve Austin. We got DX. We got The Rock. We got all these bigger names kind of getting the leash, the lead being let out so that they could do that. And then fast forward to his return to WWE. Matt and I were talking before we even started recording. One of his favorite Hulk Hogan matches was him and The Rock. And that's huge. And him coming back to WWE was huge. And everybody wanted to get the rub off of him. Like, it's just how it is. So we have to separate the man from the character. And you can't tap dance on dude's grave. Like, he made the industry what it is. He made it as mainstream as it is. And he laid the foundation for the Stone Cold Steve Austins to later come along and go, hold my beer, I'm going to take this to the next level. But all that foundation was laid by Hulk Hogan. Matt, what are your thoughts about Hulk Hogan?
So much I could say about the Hulkster. I remember his initial WWF run back when he was a heel and Freddie Blassie was his manager and all that. And then he went over to AWA because Vince Sr. did not allow Hulk to be in Rocky 3 because Hogan was, he was fighting Backlund for the world title, but he got the offer to do Rocky 3, and Vince Sr. said, absolutely not. You're a wrestler. You're not a movie star. So that's when Hulk left WWF, did Rocky 3, and then went and spent a couple of years in AWA, which just, set that territory on fire back in the day. But thanks to Vern Gagne being so old school, he didn't want to put a title on a non-amateur background, so he'd stick with either himself or Nick Bockwinkel or somebody else. Cheated Hogan out of the title, and then when Vince offered him the money, that's when the magic happened. Matter of fact, the day he died, I had to watch the match with when he beats the Iron Sheik for the world title, because to me, I remember, because I was, grew up, we had Bob Backlund, Vanilla. For people that only know Bob Backlund by the Mr. Backlund run, it's amazing how different the two Backlunds were. Just from this howdy-doody, like, aw shucks guy to be just becoming like this lunatic in the 90s. So, but anyway, the Bob Backlund I grew up was the very vanilla goody two-shoes. And then the Iron Sheik comes in, the dastardly Iron Sheik, and wins the world title. And we're only 3 years removed from the Iran hostages. Actually, 2 years. Yeah, 2.5 years. That was 81. Because, the hostages were freed right at the day Reagan got elected. So that was early 81. So, I mean, we're only 2.5 years from that. There's a lot of tension going on. And, man, what a time to bring Hogan in. I mean, back in the 80s, it was very popular to be patriotic. I mean, it was people flew flags everywhere. People were outspokenly patriotic. And now you have this guy, Hogan, always carrying an American flag, And I've always been a heel guy. So, I mean, back and forth. But, as I've gotten to be more of an older teenager, I like the heels like Don Morocco and Greg Valentine and all these guys. But when Hogan was going against like a foreign enemy person like the Iron Sheik or Nikolai Volkov and all these other ones, the whole thing was Sergeant Slaughter. I mean, gosh, I was at basic training at Fort Jackson in April of '91 when they had WrestleMania 7, and Sean, and any vets that'll listen and know, drill sergeants wouldn't give you a lot of personal information. Well, the
Oh,
Monday after WrestleMania, we're forming up for first formation for PT. After we get all our accountability, the drill sergeant puts out his stuff. The last thing he says before we started PT was, "Oh, by the way, everything's all right in America. Hogan beat Slaughter last night at WrestleMania." So that was like a big thing. I mean, that's just how big he was because people got behind him. And like Sean and I were talking earlier too, like before Hogan, if you watch like old NWA or even old WWF, like from the old school on the Peacock, and you see stuff like the early '80s, late '70s, you didn't see families there. You might have seen husband and wife there, but it was an older
yep.
crowd. It was a different crowd, and Hogan brought it out, made wrestling cool, made wrestling a family event where you started seeing. I mean, the merchandise was just like astronomical too. But I mean, Hogan's name was on everything. I mean, he had ice cream bars. He had a cartoon show. He hosted Saturday Night Live, like you said, the A Team,
Hello, buddy.
the Tonight Show. Like anybody who had a talk show, Hogan was on it. Hogan was giving out awards at the the American Music Awards. I remember him being like one of the awards giver. Like he would just show up everywhere, and it was cool because everybody liked Hulk. And I didn't see a lot of the WCW stuff in the '90s. I had an ex-wife that absolutely hated wrestling, and I was working a lot and going to school, so I missed quite a bit of that. I was more into being a WWF purist. But again,
Snob.
like look at the feuds Hogan had. I mean, him and Macho Man and Orndorff and like John Studd with the Slam Challenge, the feud with Andre. Like it was just so many people he worked with and had great stuff with. And Hogan's never going to go down as like a great catch can. I
No.
mean, he was pretty much a brawler. You watch his Japan stuff. He throws in, some stuff that would shock you to see, but his American style was meat and potatoes. There was nothing fancy about it. Man, charisma for like days, like the most charismatic performer. You could say Dusty was charismatic, and he was, superstar Billy Graham. But guess what? Hogan took stuff from them, and he blatantly said that. I took stuff from Dusty. I took stuff from superstar Graham, and he just added to it. So, I mean,
Yep.
without Hogan, you don't have Saturday Night's Main Event. You probably don't have WrestleMania, and do we even talking about a revival in wrestling today that we're seeing, between WWE, AEW, TNA, Ring of Honor, all this stuff. I mean, like, and wrestling now has become water cooler talk again, like it was in the '80s, and then as it was again in the Attitude Era. So, I mean, a lot of people still talk about Hulk Hogan, especially now after his death, but monumental to our sport. Like he was the Babe Ruth, and there'll never be another Hulkster.
No. No. There'll be other people that go over. There's gonna. I think it's well established that the superstar to Hollywood path is always there. And WWE does a good job of getting their people out there. Like we talked about it a few pods ago. Like I was watching Tacoma FD, and there was an episode where Dexter Loomis was on there, and he was talking, which threw me off, but whatevs. But the whole point is that like I think a lot of that foundational stuff was truly and honestly laid down by Hulk Hogan, and we have to be careful in the way that we say things though. Like, did he save wrestling? No, but he mainstreamed it, and he laid
Yeah.
the foundation for it to become the juggernaut that it is today. And I think that denying that would be foolhardy because the early WrestleManias, which were gambles, and they were glomming on to any celebrity they could get their hands on. Like Hulk Hogan was the conduit for that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I think that there's a lot of good there. It's just, like I said, you don't have to acknowledge the man, but you do have to acknowledge the character and the contributions that character gave. And, that's the important takeaway from all this. Like, you can still respect what he brought to the table and not totally discard what he did, because to discard what he did for the industry is a huge
Yep.
freaking, it's a huge slight. Because look, man, like, human being or not, like, I those same wrestlers that we're talking about in the Attitude Era, all those people, like, bro, every effing one of them knew Hulk Hogan. Every
Yep.
one of those,
Hmm.
the older superstars knew who he was, wanted to wrestle with him, wanted to interact with him. He set the standard. Now, your newer guys, maybe they don't go as far back. Like, it's fine. But you have to acknowledge what he did for the industry. And he really, we'll say he was foundational. I think that's the best way of putting it. Where him and Andre really were probably the two biggest things in the world. And there's probably never going to be anything more iconic than watching Hulk Hogan slam Andre the Giant. Period.
No,
Like, was it the greatest technical match ever? No. Andre was, like, hurt. Like, he was hurting. But still,
no, but
the
it gave you a
image of
moment.
him,
You gave you a moment that'll last forever. That's the thing.
that's one of the biggest poster children for anything wrestling. Anything. Like, but it's not just that. He was pop culture before pop culture was pop culture. Period. Like, there's no question of that. Like, you brought up, I brought up the A-Team thing. You brought up the night shows. Shit, I think he did an episode of Baywatch. He had a TV show that was crap, but he had it.
Yeah.
Like, but the whole point
Did
is
some
that,
movies.
but the whole point
But you know
is
what?
like,
Here's the thing, Sean. All these celebrities and all of us as people, we have stuff in our lives that we regret. If we want to point fingers at Hogan, you can point fingers at other wrestlers. I don't want to mention names, but there's some pretty big names that have done some really shitty stuff in their life. But you know what? You move on.
by far,
And if you
way
get it,
worse.
and I mean,
Way
yeah,
worse.
I mean,
Way worse.
if you got Devon Dudley coming out and saying we need to forgive him, maybe what we got to do is, and I'm not just using Hogan, but people in general, I think we got to realize that people, yeah, we do bad stuff. I've done bad stuff, but there's a redemption absence. If you could, there should always be an avenue of forgiveness. Like if you, that's why people today are so angry because they don't know how to forgive. They don't know how to understand that people can change and learn from mistakes. And sometimes, you know what, making a mistake, even if it's a really bad one, kind of can make you a better person in the long run if you learn from those mistakes. But
Exactly.
I'm going to get off my rant box because I don't want to make it like into Matt's angry opinion. But I just, I think a little bit of grace and forgiveness goes a long way in life, and I think
It does.
I think we can afford that to guys like Hogan and others too.
Look, it doesn't absolve anybody of anything, but
No,
again, you gotta understand, but like, I agree with you on the sentiment, because it's like, you can't have your worst day of one of your worst mistakes just end your life. Like, that's just how
no,
it is. But
yeah.
again, we're not here to focus on his personal life. We're here to focus on the wrestler, and he has done great and amazing things.